Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by the University of Rhode Island Online, who are offering a cannabis certificate program. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, the University of Rhode Island has that program I just mentioned to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, their certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in just 2 semesters. The next application deadline for the summer 2023 session is April 4th. Coming right up. Mark your calendars, right? Courses start May 9th. Learn more at uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call, 401-874-5280. Mayor Smiley, great to be here in the mayor's office with you. What does it feel like to be mayor of Providence?
It's a dream. For anybody who knows, this is something that I worked really hard at for a long time, and to have a chance to actually now be at work and delivering on the promises that were made and trying to, help Providence become the world-class city that I think we all know it can be is just a dream for me.
You came into office with a pretty significant project to fill. That obviously is the police chief project. You've now gotten through that. You've got a deputy chief in place. So looking back on that moment, how critical of a phase was that initial big project as you came in to kind of establishing a tone for your tenure as mayor?
It's interesting. I've had the chance to start to get to know other mayors around the country early on, and many of them told me that it's the kind of job where you don't always set the agenda, often the agenda sets you. And this is one of those moments. Obviously I tried real hard to keep Chief Clements. If you'd asked me during the campaign, I expected that he would stay and hoped that he would, and then that didn't end up being the case. And so it did become the priority for basically all of January. It's a hugely important decision and amongst the most important employment hires that I'll make. We did a lot of research into best practices. It's been 13 years since we had a police chief. Chief Clements would say that the average police chief in America's tenure is 3 to 5 years. He's been there 13 years. It's been a long time since we've done that. And policing in America has changed since then. The conversation around policing in America has changed since then. And so we did a process that had never been done before, partially reflective of that. And so we had an interview panel. I made decisions around finalists collaboratively and came to consensus with Chief Clements. And then at that point, it became our decision. We had this community forum and a community survey, not just with the police chief, but in the broader conversation around community engagement. One of the things that we had heard regularly was it's not real community engagement if the decision's already been made and you're bringing us in after the decision. You need to bring us in before the decision was made. And so that was one of the driving factors for why we publicly announced the finalists, had the public forum, had an opportunity for people to ask questions of these finalists, and then made the decision after that had happened, after the community was brought to the table. And I think it worked out really well. I'm really satisfied with the outcome. I think Chief Perez is going to be fantastic, and now Deputy Chief Commander Lanny. It's an exciting new chapter, and it's not just about filling Hugh Clements' shoes. I think that's unfair to Chief Perez. It's about taking the next step and doing even better. And so I'm happy to have the decision behind me. It consumed a lot of time and energy, but I'm also really satisfied with the outcome.
Chief Clements was often described as one of the best police chiefs in the country. I guess you could say the proof is in the pudding. He's been tapped by the Biden administration. So what is the next chapter? From your vantage point, what is the next chapter? What improvements are most critical right now, even in an advisory capacity, that you would offer the new administration in the police department?
Yeah, so with respect to community policing, which has to be the first priority, we need to do more and better community engagement. And that means allowing officers to get more deeply and more authentically embedded into the community. Certainly it includes things like attending community meetings and going to church groups and having an opportunity to be there as representatives of the Providence Police Department, but not because there's been an incident, not because there's police work to be done, but engagement work to be done. But also things like getting officers and the command staff to serve on community boards and to be involved in local nonprofits, to be involved in our schools, not as SROs, but just as community members. And so that's the next level for community policing. And this is something that I've been consistent about, some might say probably too consistent about, is expanding beyond not just violent crime and illegal guns, but into quality of life crimes in the city. One of the questions that we asked during the interview process, and everyone kind of had that same knowing moment, which is I think the police department often sees their greatest accomplishments as a major confiscation of narcotics or significant seizure of illegal guns. And those things are obviously very important. But the community, if you go to a community meeting, the thing they raise their hand about is ATVs and motorcycles, nightclubs that are unruly, catalytic converter thefts, things like that. And so we need to do both. We need to do both. We need to both stem the tide of illegal guns and illegal drugs coming into our community, and Providence is a major distribution point for the Northeast in those areas, but also focusing on the things that make our city livable and maintain that quality of life that I think is part of what makes Providence so special. And so that's the charge to Chief Perez. We still have to get used to that, right. But it's also really for the entire department to refocus on those items.
The ATV issue, it's one of those things that there's really no middle ground, it seems like. You've got people who view it as really a social justice type of issue. If you go after, in any way, shape, or form, the ATVs, whether it's through tactical policing at gas stations or anything like that. And then you've got others who are saying, hey, look, any presence of these motorized vehicles without license plates roaming the streets, whatever it is it's the worst thing in the world. And you literally hear both sides of this. How do you thread that needle? Because right now, there's literally no middle ground. There's been proposals for tracks and things like that. But some of the riders have even told me in interviews that that's not really why we do it. It's more of a cultural expression. That's a tough needle to thread, isn't it?
It is, and I'm not sure that we do need to find a middle ground, honestly. They're not legal, and they're not safe. They're not safe for the riders, and they're not safe for everyone else on the roadway. There are tracks outside of Providence where people ride. I remember talking to a business owner on Broad Street who he and his son like to drive dirt bikes, and they stick it on a trailer and they drive up to Massachusetts, and for $20 for the day they have a blast. Good for them. That's where those bikes belong, and that's where they're safe. That's what they're built for. Honestly, it sounds like fun to me too, but they're not meant for city streets. And so I don't know that there is a middle ground. They're illegal, they're unsafe, and they're deteriorating the quality of life in our city. At the time, Major Lanny, now Commander Lanny, made an interesting comment, I think, during that public meeting where, he described some of these things as quote unquote victimless crimes. He said, I refute that. I don't think they're victimless crimes. The victim is society. And I think that this is the case. Now, I don't think that this is as serious as major drug dealing or violent crime, but there is an impact, and it's an impact on everyone in the community. And so we're going to take a serious stance on this issue, and hopefully those riders hear the message loud and clear that there'll be consequences in Providence.
And neighboring Cranston also, they're confiscating these vehicles. They're going to send them to the Dominican Republic as well, apparently, to let the police department use there. So really, your position is we're going to end this.
Again, it's hard to do this safely, and we are not going to take risks that will jeopardize the physical safety of the riders and of our officers. And so I recognize that that it is a difficult, in my view, I'm sure not everyone would agree with this language, in my view, it's a difficult problem to manage. But it is my intention to end this. We are going to attempt to end it. But I would say to the community at large, this is going to be something that needs to be regularly managed, because I don't think it's going to be as simple as just we can stop this outright.
Kind of along those lines, there's a group in Providence that is concerned about noise levels. And in fact, in your community survey, which we can get into in more in depth, you included a question about noise. But then again, it's a city. So, how do you balance that? What's your position on noise? What is noise that's outrageous? Are we going to have patrols going around with decibel meters, or is it just sort of common sense? Hey, don't use a leaf blower at 6 in the morning or whatever it is. Where does that stand for you?
So the city has a noise ordinance. It's rarely enforced. And that is, in this case, there is a balance. And that's the balance, which is that, loud noises can only be between certain hours. So to your point around leaf blowers, don't do it at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. It's in violation of the ordinance. At the other end of the spectrum, loud nightclub noise after hours is prohibited. And so there is a balance. We do live in a city. I do want a vibrant nightlife. And I think most people like living in Providence because there are things to do. And so that's where, it's one of these situations where if everyone followed the rules, I think we would all enjoy a higher quality of life. What ends up happening in an environment where there's no enforcement, whether it's a club owner or a landscaper or any other, kind of noise creator in between, when they see one person getting away with it, then they say, well, why should he get away with it? I should be able to do the same. And everyone's trying to, make their business be successful, and everyone's looking to be an attractive place for customers. And so what we want to do is fair, equitable, consistent enforcement so that everyone feels like they're all playing by the rules. Nobody wants to be the one schmuck following the rules when nobody else does. And so all we're going to do is that we're not even seeking an amendment to the city's noise ordinance. We just want to enforce the one that we have.
On schools, we could do a podcast series, like a national podcast series on Providence schools. Maybe we will. Maybe I should take that out of the conversation here so no one steals the idea. But a couple things. Mount Pleasant High School. Do you know if it's going to close or not?
It's not going to close. It's not going to close. The superintendent reaffirmed that earlier this week. In the long-range planning for facilities in Providence, Mount Pleasant is on the list for either a substantial renovation or a replacement. But if it's a replacement, it's a brand new school on Mount Pleasant Avenue in Mount Pleasant, and it will be called Mount Pleasant High School. And so there will be a Mount Pleasant High School. It's not going to close. The students and the teachers there deserve better facilities than they have. And so this is not happening anytime soon. There's going to be significant community engagement that's going to happen. There's going to be an evaluation from a cost basis of is it better to renovate or replace that school. But either way, the students, and I would hope the families would be excited about the fact that there's a new or newly renovated facility coming to their community, but there will be a high school in Mount Pleasant.
On schools as well, I sat down with some I guess for lack of a better term, rank and file teachers off record, or I should say on background. I'm not going to name who they are. So not the union. And they said that their position is we have a community that is intangible, regardless of school building, regardless of school facility. Sure, some of these buildings that are, I guess they were saying, go back to Grover Cleveland's presidency, should be closed. But the intangible communities that are formed, even in scenarios where there's been significant violence, stabbings and things like this that we've seen, those bonds are worth preserving from a community leadership standpoint, not an official school, not in the capacity of understanding that the state has taken over the school district. you, as an ambassador for the city, how important is it for communities that exist in physical buildings right now, for those communities to be preserved, whether it means new construction or moving existing schools as a unit, teachers and students into the same new buildings, so that those communities that have taken years to forge, even the interpersonal relationships between staff and teachers, can be preserved? Because that seems to be a number one concern of all these teachers that I spoke with.
Yeah, it's certainly important, but there are other factors that have to come into play. And so I think where we can have neighborhood schools that families in the neighborhood want to send their kids to, that, you get back to the policing conversation, that then is in the same neighborhood where there is real community policing, where you know your neighborhood police officer, you know your district commander, you've got a relationship with the community library. In many cases, you might have a neighborhood health center that's in the area as well. Then you start to have these bonds that get formed, and kind of society, families start to look out for one another. I think that is the ideal. The other, and we should strive towards that. However, there's other factors at play that need to be taken into account. So first of all, with our current school assignment policy, families have the opportunity to try to place their kids in other schools within the system, and many families do. And so we have lots of families that don't go to their neighborhood school because they feel like it's not the best option for their student, or that it's not the best school. And additionally, we have an environment right now where enrollment is falling, and it is not financially sustainable for the system at large to have half-filled schools. And so I certainly agree and acknowledge the intangible value of those community bonds. But you can't ignore some of these other factors if they come into play. They don't always do, but sometimes they do.
On housing, we've had here on the podcast a lot of conversations with everyone from the United Way to Secretary Pryor, Governor McKee, Speaker Shikarchi, you name it, realtors, nonprofits, homeless advocates. One common factor, and that's supply and demand, has been the major driver of the conversation. And I ask you, as the face of the city now, is Providence ready to make significant zoning changes to examine short-term rental regulations, including maybe houseboats that are propped up, either to expand housing or to using those short-term rentals, or even to contract the available short-term rentals to add to the general housing stock, and further the role that the nonprofit universities play in the community? Is the city ready through either taxation or other methods to look at the supply and demand and increase the supply of housing through those or other methods?
Yeah. So I add me to the list of folks who say we have primarily a supply and demand problem. And I would say primarily have a supply problem. We have excess demand and inadequate supply. And so we do need to allow for additional density. I feel very fortunate to be coming into office at an exciting time, because we are going to be passing a new comprehensive plan for the city that happens once every 10 years. The planning for it actually started this past fall, and we'll be submitting to the city council like a year from now a new comprehensive plan. This happens once a decade in every community, and this is our chance to change the rules to allow for greater density across the city, and it's something that I support. I also, before that gets passed, I'm going to continue to push aggressively for additional housing at every price point in every neighborhood. And we're seeing things happen already. I mean, there was a story in the paper today about we're sitting in my office in City Hall. Right behind us, the old Providence Journal building, which was going to be a hotel project, is now going to be apartments. There was a city plan commission last night. 2 housing proposals got passed through the Plan Commission last night. There are moves happening as we speak, and we're going to continue to push for greater density throughout the city to meet that demand, which I think is a good problem to have, that people want to live here. And in these projects that we're talking about, different from in other cities maybe, we're not really talking about displacement. People are getting displaced because of economics, that just the rising cost of rents. But we're not tearing down buildings full of apartments to build luxury high-rises. We're still renovating, rehabbing, or building new on vacant land or vacant, abandoned, or blighted properties that nobody's living in. So these are all positive contributors to the supply problem. We're a little bit unlike Newport on the Airbnb question. We don't have the proliferation of short-term rentals that's pushing out long-term tenants or renters. Very small. Our issues around Airbnbs are largely around public safety, some Airbnbs that have become like party houses in the middle of neighborhoods. But it's not a major issue in Providence, at least with respect to displacement or using up what would otherwise be long-term housing stock for residents. We're going to keep a close eye on that to make sure that doesn't become a problem, but we're fortunate in that we don't have that same dilemma that communities in Rhode Island are having, and certainly communities around the country are having. But I think we should be looking at every available opportunity to keep building more at every place along the price spectrum.
The Raimondo Alumni Network. It's a thing. You're here, you've got Secretary Pryor. There's a million people. We can go, we're not going to spend all day going through them. Gabe Amo. It's a real thing in this community. And I think I've framed it as there's the Raimondo Alumni Network, and then there's the Blackstone Valley Mayoral Peer Group. There's two major power players in the public-facing. You may not want to comment on this, but can those two groups effectively work together?
Well, let me say on the network, we've coined a phrase.
Do you guys have a matching jacket?
Yeah, right, exactly. The secret handshake and everything. One of the many lessons, and I learned many lessons from Governor Raimondo, was, and I think she would use these terms, that she was a voracious scout for talent. And I think one of her great accomplishments, and again, one of my great lessons learned, was how much time and energy she put into attracting and retaining high quality people to serve in government. Working in government is hard. In many cases, people have more financially advantageous offers in the private sector. The level of public scrutiny and sometimes the nonsense that you have to deal with it's a tough job. And she was great at getting smart people to do hard jobs. And I'm trying to take that lesson with me here in City Hall. And so, I'm excited about the fact that she had all these smart people that are still kind of in public service or in the community doing important things. And it's not a competing teams thing. I've worked really hard in just 6 weeks to integrate myself into the community of mayors in Rhode Island, not just the Blackstone Valley, but all of them. My predecessor was not particularly engaged with the League of Cities and Towns. I've sought to get much more involved and was voted onto the executive committee at my first meeting, and I've spent a lot of time both kind of officially and personally. Personal relationships matter a lot. We've gone to dinner a couple times and gathered lunches, and just we have so many shared interests and similar policy objectives and concerns that we've really started working quite closely and really well together, and I think that I'm happy to both be a member of the Raimondo Alumni Association, but also a proud member of the Association of Mayors here in Rhode Island that are really doing the hard work day to day on the ground that's impacting people's lives.
Totally understood. Last question here. The community survey. It's the specifics of it. It's interesting. It's widely available if a citizen of Providence looks for it, or I should say a resident of Providence actually looks for it. But that level of community engagement, you saw it with the police department. Some people were critical of the auditorium type environment that you had where public input could be offered, I suppose, ahead of the forum that you conducted for the police department vetting. Others were celebrating that. Is that community engagement something that might be part of the Smiley doctrine when in 8 years we're sitting here and we're doing your exit interview?
I hope so. I think you can only effectuate change if the community supports you to do so. And so I want to do big things in Providence, and I can't do it without community support, and it needs to be informed by the community. You know, one of the really important lessons that I've kind of learned over and over again is, for most people, you know, I'm a political person, I've worked in government, I could tell you the difference between a federal program, a state program, a local program, a Rhode Island housing program, but for most people, government's government, and they can't be bothered to know. And so it's really important for us to hear from the voices of people who aren't the 300 very actively involved regular attendees of public meetings about what's working, what's not, and in some cases what they don't even know about. You know, we've got programs. We had this community listening session right after my swearing in with respect to the schools, and there was a breakout session on after-school programming and recreation center, after-school programs, summer programs. And, you know, I can't tell you the number of people who raised their hand and said, I drive my kid to Johnston to do a swimming program. I do this. I shouldn't have to do that. We offer all those things. They just didn't know. And so I think one of the things we hope to learn from this survey, and hopefully will in fact be something that the constituents in Providence see in the years to come, is regularly checking in with people to understand, to kind of reset our expectations about what people know and don't know, what's working for them and what's not working for them. You know, too often the kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease, which is fine. We should be solving problems as they come up, but sometimes that's a very small sample. And what regular people are going through every day in their lives, they don't have the time or energy to call and complain or come to a public hearing. And so that's what we're hoping to glean, and I hope that it's a lesson that we continue to take in the years to come. You know, I will say, for everybody listening, I would encourage you to take this survey. For any resident of Providence or business owner in Providence, it's available in 7 languages. It's a quick community survey. It's going to inform our work. It's going to inform budgetary priorities. I think it's a tool to hold ourselves accountable. Did we make progress on these things that you said were working well and working poorly for you? And so I would encourage everyone to please take just 5 minutes and go online, click through it real quick, and because it will make a difference, and it will inform the work that we're doing and where we put the resources that we have to improve the quality of life and the business environment here in Providence.
Mayor Brett Smiley, behind the desk here in the office, you look happy. You look relaxed. Like you look like you got it done. You got the politics worked out, and now you're ready to do business. That's an assessment I'm making, but it seems accurate, right?
Yeah, it's exactly how I feel. Campaigning is really, you know, I'm a true believer in politics and our nature of government. You know, by going to thousands of people's doors over the last 2 years, you know, I heard from them kind of what was a top concern, and it was great. But that was always the price of admission to have a chance to come and get to work. And now I'm finally at work.
Will the Little League team still be playing this season?
Yeah, the Smiley Sluggers.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, Fox Point Little League.
All right.
I hope it's going to be a good season.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.